Well, so we're having a little trouble here. The HEC circuit seems to be very grumpy. It actually kind of wants to take off and fly. It sort of wants to howl here a little bit. Something weird is going on. I found a couple things that don't make any sense. One thing I found was this capacitor was cut loose. It was in place of this yellow one. So I tacked that yellow one in there just temporarily. Another thing I've found, I'm kind of having a little trouble determining. There appear to be two versions of this thing, and I'm not sure which version I've got. The schematic doesn't line up 100%. The drawing I've got here shows this, let's see here, this 470 ohm resistor to ground when the AVC, excuse me, control is engaged. And it looks like I've got that resistor right there. Although this is very interesting, this is really hard to see. I don't know. Even for me, it appears, if you look at the brown band toward the right, and I'm not sure how I'm going to show this to you. Okay, there it is in the middle. See how that looks weird? There's the yellow, the purple, and then the brown band, and there's almost like a line there. Then there's the silver band. I think that's a crack. It doesn't show up in the camera, but it shows up here. And I believe this yellow wire, or this, excuse me, this orange wire here goes to this switch, which should be here. This is really hard to do with the camera, and okay. So this should get grounded when the switch is turned on, when the automatic volume control is turned on. The automatic volume control doesn't seem to work very well. Like I said, it appears to be oscillating. There's kind of a howl. This whole circuit is a little different. It appears that they tap the IF and bring it down here to this tube to amplify the signal. I'm not sure what this tuned circuit does here. It must be a kind of a bandpass filter. And then it sort of disappears and kind of goes around and around. It's a little unusual. It gets mixed in with a socket, but I'm ignoring that. But it looks like it gets, I don't know what this is. It doesn't make any sense to me. The book doesn't explain any of it. It does say to adjust this, you inject an IF signal, and it says, the way that the test is set up, it says adjust this for a dip. Well, you don't do this here because the dip is the automatic volume control signal pulling the IF strip and the RF strip down. But it's a little, it doesn't seem to work right. When I do that, it gets real howly. It's like gotta be a cap going to hell, a bypass cap. These receivers are also kind of notorious for having bad resistors. What really sucks, I'm just going to use that word because it does. I found online a kind of a lengthy forum, thread on a forum where there was a gentleman having almost the identical same issue. He said the thing seemed kind of howly. It didn't seem to work very well. What sucks is that he just gave up. It was like 4 or 5 pages, and then he just gave up, and it looked like he just shotgunned the thing and started replacing tons of caps. I don't know if I don't know. It's a little weird. If I think about it and find it again, I'll put a link down here. I think what I might do, another thing I found was a little interesting, is basically this resistor. Is 470 ohms, and should just be 470 ohms to ground, roughly. That's what it looks like. It looks like it goes here, and there's a cap. It's a little bypass cap. It goes down here, it goes over, it joins up at this accessory connector, it goes over, and I've lost track of it already. And it ends up here, I believe. But it says it's 900 ohms, which isn't right. So is there something screwed up there? I don't know. I'm going to try and unsolder it. I think I can. I don't know. I guess I'm just going to. Well, one thing I could do is I could lift. No, that shouldn't be an issue. I don't know. I'm going to have to explore this a little more carefully. There's a cap there. Maybe that resistor went to hell. Let me check it. Figure out how to check it. I think I might just clip it and then check it and then solder it, kind of splice, butt solder it back together. It's sort of ghetto-y, but or not very professional, but we'll do it anyway. Well, what I did here, if I can find it, is I just clipped this at the kind of where it bends. And if it's good, I'll just tack solder it back together and make a note of it, and then I'll go back later. But yeah, about that. Remember, 470 ohms, right? It says so. 91 ohms. Haha, we have you now. So maybe that's the culprit there. That would explain a couple things. I measured a voltage over here at the socket, and I think I measured it. Yeah, there's a chart and a tube chart, and it showed the voltages here, and it shows this like at 2.3, 2.6 volts, and this is like 1.1, so that would definitely be a problem. I'm kind of curious what that crack is. Well, I got a duty calls. I have to take the missus over to see the witch doctor. So anyway, well, how's it going today? So we're back at the National, the NC 183D, and things are kind of sort of going badly. Yeah, no good deed goes unpunished. So here's what's going on. So I did some poking around in here and a little cleaning, and things seem to be okay. I mean, I just did some rough probing around and a little fiddling around. I really wasn't paying close attention. So I did find in my travels, no, I didn't find that. This cap was cut loose, and it was over here, and there's a kind of a shiny new brand new paper put in its place. I just kind of gooned that in there. What that is about that I can't remember right off the bat. That's really embarrassing. Oh well. Hang on a tick. Okay, I had to think. This stuff starts to blend together after a while. Okay, so what that is that's the amplifier for the automatic gain control or automatic volume control. And you have to excuse my doodles here. So that's this tube. This is, what was that, a 6 AH6, and that's on the screen actually. And it had that pulled to ground. It's like about that cap thinks it's a resistor, or it's turned into a resistor, so it's about 500K. So it pulls this to ground. And that's the screen there. That ought to be about, I don't know, probably about 110 volts. And it's kind of a big zero, or was. Okay. No big deal. So I fixed that up, and then the thing started working a little better, but I noticed a big problem, and the more I fiddled with it, the more I started to notice it. Let's hope there's no commercials here. Okay.
But they just didn't know that the mental kind of, the mental checklist. Remember how LeBron said during that first year in Miami that he was keeping track of all the haters?
Okay. Sounds normal enough, right? Well, the problem here is that the gain is turned way down on the RF gain, and the automatic volume control is turned off. If I turn that on and turn it up, it's all muffled.
And then you process like this is Steph Curry in transition or off a crossover anytime.
Okay.
I mean, it's just ridiculous what he's done. I mean,
So if I turn that down, there's no signal level.
We've changed the way we view shooting, what's a good shot, what's a bad shot, at least for now. Now, if other players taking that same shot, you wouldn't have the same, okay, it's going to go in at a rate of 40+%, but still.
So the radio seems to be being overdriven. And one other little tidbit here. Let's get that back.
But I also wonder if the impact of Steph Curry is now, 10 years from now, playing in.
One of the other things that doesn't seem to work very good is just the automatic volume control action. A strong signal like that ought to be, the radio circuitry should be able to, turn the RF strips down and keep it from being overloaded. This radio is a little unusual for my normal fare. It's dual conversion and it has two RF sections. So right here in these two tubes, so it's got two RF front ends, then it goes into the converter, then it starts into the IF. It's got a separate amplifier for the AGC, or I keep calling it that. It's the automatic volume control. Okay, so I did some snooping around. I measured a few voltages, and I got to looking at this voltage here, right here. It was like 1.1 volts, and if the camera focuses a little better, it's a 470 ohm resistor. Well, what did I do with that? Okay, there it is. I got to looking at that real careful, and there's a little piece of video here. If I find it, I'll bolt it together here. Sometimes these things don't go in order or as planned. So I measured this resistor, and it's even though it's 470 ohms, it's more like 93 ohms, and if you look at it, it's real tough to see. It's sort of bowed, and it's sort of swollen up right around the silver band there. Anyway, it's been overheated, so I replaced that just temporarily with this resistor right there. Okay, that brought this voltage up, but the AGC or AVC action doesn't seem to be very good. I was looking through the alignment, and it said to align this coil. They call it a transformer, but it's just a coil. It's in the, and that sort of is supposed to help things out. I did that. It actually says to align it for a null. And what they're doing there is you hook a test signal up, you hook an audio voltmeter on the output, so you're supposed to adjust that to null the meter reading, which makes sense. As the AGC or AVC starts working, it should supply more voltage to the RF strips and the IF strips to turn things down. I can get it to do that, but it doesn't seem to work as well as I had planned. I don't know, this clip lead was the AGC or AVC cap. There's a cap in there that sets that time constant. I cut that loose to measure it. It didn't seem to really be bad. I started reading about these sets very carefully. One thing I found is they apparently are kind of notorious bad actors when it comes to the resistors being out of tolerance. Well, of course, just to be a pain in my side, I really haven't found that many bad resistors. I found a couple, and they aren't in any critical locations. And that one resistor up in the AVC amplifier doesn't seem to be an issue. I found what I believe was one other one in the that drove the grid for the one of the tubes in the IF strip, and it was a kind of a false reading. I had it in the circuit when I did it, and it didn't make a lot of difference, so I'm kind of stuck here a tiny bit. Now, one of the other things I did read was the amount of AGC generated or AVC generated voltages don't seem to be high enough to really counteract the thing. So I set off on this little journey, and one thing I did read is, actually I've read three things, or more than three. One is that these seem to be bad actors when it comes to the gains of those IF strips, maybe. I saw, or I'm just going to give you the list here. If you want to, go ahead or go get coffee or whatever, that's fine. What was I saying? Oh, anyway, one of the things I read, which was kind of accidental, I was just perusing eBay, looking at these. I saw one of these for sale, and the guy said he'd had a friend work on it, and in the pictures there, the friend had a invoice. He'd done some repairs. He said he replaced these caps. I needed to go back and find that. I never thought about that. He said he replaced a bunch of caps. That's probably what's really going on. Anyway, in there, it had a note that said, keep the RF gain down. The receiver gets overloaded easily. Well, what I believe it is it's got some problem, and he didn't recognize that it was a problem. It's a little obscure. Okay, then I read some other things online. I also read that there's a resistor. This guy claimed he actually worked for National in the 60s. He claimed there was a resistor in here. It's up in here. It's right there. That they set that and adjust the gain at the factory. Now, one thing that's interesting to me here is that looks like 220 ohms, and it is pretty close to that. But if you look at the drawing where that's at, it's right there. It's on the cathode of that IF tube number 5. Here it says 47 ohms. So it sounds like somebody's been in there fiddling around. So just for fun, I tacked a 47 ohm resistor in there. Well, it made things worse. It actually added more gain to the thing. I don't know, it wasn't. And he said that that they put a pot in there and fiddle with it and then take it out and then measure that value. Yeah, that sounds like something I used to do 20 years ago. Okay, well, we got that problem. Another thing that popped up too is after, let's see, how did this go? I'm gonna back up a little bit here. The radio wants to howl when the gain is all the way up. Now I've chased that away. That was this resistor here in that cathode of that AVC amp, and I've seen a lot of people grumbling about howling radios, that it oscillates. So that's kind of interesting to me. I suppose technically I should replace all these paper caps. One of the reasons I'm making this hard for myself is I don't like just shotgunning all that stuff. Weird. I always find new stuff when I'm looking at stuff. That definitely is new. I wonder what that's some sort of like gimmick or feedback. And if you look down the barrel of that, yeah, there's one there too. See that little loop? These, I'm getting all over the place here. Sorry about this. It's very early in the morning. What was I talking about? I don't know. This is not coming out well. I don't know. This has kind of got me scratching my head pretty good. I worked on this about 8 hours the other day, even though it doesn't look like it. I spent a lot of time measuring the voltages and measuring resistors. I'd read a lot that people say that these have bad resistors, and I'd mentioned that before. I didn't find that to be true. Not so much, anyway, that it should make a difference. Oh, that was one other thing I did do. I did break down and test the tubes. I'm not a big fan of testing the tubes. Usually in the circuit you can usually find bad tubes. Interestingly enough, the front end, the very first RF tube on mine, is pretty much dead. It fires up, but it doesn't have any gain, so it's more of a big capacitor than anything, which really is interesting. I thought that would straighten things up, but that didn't do. Actually, it didn't do a damn thing. There was something else I did too. I replaced the AVC tube just for fun because I couldn't figure out anything else. I'm having a little trouble figuring out how that even works. It looks like, I still can't remember what I was going to talk about originally. Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to stop here. I got a couple things I need to do. I need to think about this a little bit. What I need to do is make a list here.